We are live.
Senate Appropriations, April 9th. We're going to look at the technical letter. It doesn't have this nice name as the Dear Jane letter that the administration sends us about the House passed budget H2951. We have Mr. Nixon from JFO that walk us through this. Should all be on your desk. Here's another.
Yeah, I need all the help I can get.
Okay. So
Thank you, Grady Nixon with Fiscal. So the technical letter is a letter that the administration sends to the Senate Appropriations Committee each year, pointing out not issues of policy, but just technical corrections to what was in the House bill. I would say about 95% of this JFO concurs with, pending any decisions that the Senate Appropriations Committee makes. So obviously corrections to numbers changes would only be implemented if the Senate makes no further changes to those numbers sections. On page 1, section A101, this is the first of a series of technical corrections that would just add in capital appropriations. So the House, in an amendment on the floor, added in the cash fund appropriations from the capital bill to the budget, but these corresponding references to capital appropriations weren't included in the House budget. So sections A101, 102, and 103 on page 2 would all be addressing the fact that the cash fund appropriations are in this bill.
they also, so they're in both bills, the cash appropriation.
The authorization language is in the capital bill, and then the appropriations themselves are in the budget.
You know, so how do those line up later, which is not really a question of the technical letter. So that there's the Senate institutions could change what they want the cash fund to be used for.
Correct.
And we could change the money.
Correct. Traditionally, Senate appropriations would make amendments to those cash fund appropriations to align with whatever is in the Senate version of the capital bill.
There could be a capital bill caucus committee and a Senate caucus committee that come to different. We just have to make sure we
Make sure that they align. Yeah.
Okay.
On the bottom of page 2, this is a correction to B133. There was an addition to some of these number sections related to the pension systems where numbers weren't added correctly. So that would just address that. On page 3, the total for general government would need to be updated just to reflect that additional use of pension trust fund funds. Section B206.1, the House meant to eliminate 123,000 of vacancy savings, but it was misentered in the web report. So it provided an increase of 147,000 general fund, which was about 24,000 more than the House intended. Section B233.1, this is a correction to show that there was an accidental doubling of ARPA appropriations in this section. Section B241, again, this would just update the totals pending those other technical corrections. Section B309, the House provided 500,000 general fund for the Bridges to Health program, and it should be included in section B312, not B309. And then the following you'll see in section B312 on page 5 of this document, where they're adding it from B309 to B312. And then they're also recommending moving $45,000 that was included by the House for harm reduction services to section B313, which is where those harm reduction services grants actually are coming out of. Section B514.1, again, this reflects the changes to OPEB administrative costs. So just correcting that and then updating the total of general education because of that. On page 7, the House, in their construct for reflecting the appropriations that relate to H938, had one large appropriation and then separated out the allocations for that. The administration flagged that in theory, having it as one singular appropriation, the allocations could be moved around with more flexibility than if each had its own debt ID. So the technical letter recommends separating those out. I would just flag two things for the committee on this. One is that we've heard from the Agency of Human Services regarding the actual setup of these appropriations. So I think we'll have some more information for you later on that. And then also, of course, Senate Health and Welfare is working on H 938 currently. So for now, I would just table this and move on pending what happens with that.
H 938.
Yes.
The homelessness continuum care.
Okay. Center line.
On page 8, this is just a correction that the funds that the House put in for Vermont Legal Aid's Vermont Legal Aid Helpline are not global commitment eligible. So it's still the general fund, federal fund split, but it's just clarifying that that's not global commitment. And then a minor tweak to the dollar amount for the AOT one-time appropriation. This one-time appropriation was included in the GovRec, and the number was just slightly off from what it should have been. Section C103, the administration is flagging that this is the section that is updating the appropriations made in Act 73. And in the new language, it references the section. The administration was flagging that it should refer to the subdivision, which is subdivision A3. So it shouldn't say section, but it also shouldn't say subdivision. JFO would just tweak this to make sure that that internal reference is correct.
This is A3, this paragraph that they're making that section, the subdivisions.
So this language here is adding further parameters around the allocation of an appropriation. So it should reference that subdivision A3.
This C3, this.
Exactly. So the administration's recommendation, that internal reference wouldn't make sense. It should reference subdivision A3.
Yeah.
Section C106. This is an amendment to, bless you. This is a House amendment that proposes a $650,000 general fund reversion from the Department of Corrections base. This reverts spending authority from the current year base appropriation to amend the current year budget. The administration is flagging here that there's not necessarily a guarantee that those funds would remain. So the administration later on in the technical letter flags a different mechanism for addressing this. And I believe the committee is discussing changes to this as part of a broader discussion. So you'll see that pop up again later in the technical letter. Section C107. This is reflecting the recommended change to C106. So you have to also change the total here. Section C108, this is the reduction of the Department of Environmental Conservation emissions repair program. So the House had a reversion of about $598,000. The technical letter flags that there are outstanding contracts that may mean that $598,000 is not fully available, and recommends reducing this appropriation that is still continuing in the current fiscal year to $300,000, which would reflect that appropriation net of those contracts, which are expected to be about $300,000.
Does JFO think this is a technical correction? Because when I talk to the House, they do not think this is.
So exactly, this would be a policy consideration on what the General Assembly wishes to do with those contracts. So changing the money would impact that contract. So I wouldn't make any recommendation that the Senate necessarily accept this.
Right, but I guess I was asking whether you think it's technical or not. seems to be saying that you think it's a policy.
This would be aligning with the administration's current understanding of those contracts, of the obligation of that appropriation.
We could,
But that's an outstanding decision that the General Assembly could make.
they could cancel the contract.
Correct.
There was.
So the conversations that I had, with the, members of the, House Appropriations, they seem to think that there was another source of money for this, that some came from, transportation, from, AOT. And, so they thought they had accounted for this, for the contracts. And so that's the question that I would just raise is, are there other, is there more money going into this pot that would be intended to pay for those contracts? Because that was at least that's how I understood the conversation as it came.
I remember the transportation committee worked on this, but I don't think there's any money in the transportation fund that goes to this program. It's a DEC program. Unless the original 600 that was put over there was transportation fund.
There's something about that there's money in some pot already that was supposed to cover this, but
Yeah, well, I think this is about.
Yeah.
And how much did they was 598 or something?
The House reverted 598,000. And so, yes, you'll see later on, the administration also recommends striking that $598,000 reversion.
Would it have been part of that Volkswagen settlement, by any chance?
I don't know, I can follow up with, it was from Representative Swirl.
Yeah, it could have been PW money that they were going to use.
Back away.
Yeah, but they still did, when they testified here or in transportation, they do still have some money in that.
Yeah.
Fund surprising. Okay, well, we need to look more into that.
Section C-109 on page 11. This again, is reflecting that the House proposed to revert 80,000, roughly 80,000 of a current year appropriation. And the administration flagged that the remaining balance in the appropriation is only 71,000, and that it is also a current year appropriation. So rather than reverting it, this would just reduce the appropriation to the amount that corresponds to what is left of that appropriation currently. So reduce it to 28,000, reflecting that there's that 71,000 of that appropriation would be getting pulled.
And then is this the same issue as before? Is there a difference of opinion? Or is it a real technical correction?
It's my understanding that this is a technical correction.
There was just a misunderstanding about how much money was going in the
Slightly less money left in that appropriation than the House thought. And then because it is a current year appropriation, it would just reduce the appropriation rather than revert it.
Okay. So does it change, if we make this correction, does it change the House's bottom line?
By about $9,000.
Negative.
Right, this reflects a $9,000 central reduction of that reversion.
Good.
Section D-101, so the administration has recommendations for changing how that interest from the Technology Modernization Fund is being referred to, because the actual amount of interest is known. The administration recommended just actually formally doing it as a fund transfer rather than including language saying that an amount estimated to be $9.5 million will be transferred from the tech fund to the general fund. So that would just be a technical correction, reflecting that amount of that transfer is known. And then you'll see in sub 2 on page 12, this is an amendment to the amount of money coming from the liquor control fund and the administration flagged that that transfer would be less than was in the GovRec, and I believe that that issue has been resolved, and so the committee can disregard that technical tweak there. You'll see in the notation there that they identified that the balance is lower than they thought. And that could create a hole in the House budget, but you can disregard that. That's no longer the case.
So we can disregard all of that on the top of page 12.
We're just in line 2 there in subdivision 2 related to the liquor control fund. The other technical changes reflect the change to the technology modernization fund, which JFO would recommend if the Senate Appropriations Committee retains any transfer of money from the technology modernization fund, that this construct would be appropriate.
Okay.
Section D102. So here you'll see the recommended striking of that AOE appropriation. So striking the 80,000 reversion. And then again, these other two here on page 13 relate to that Department of Corrections $650,000 reversion and the DEC emissions repair program reversion. And both of those, I think, would remain outstanding for the time being.
Why the correction fund? I don't remember that one.
Earlier,
We talked about it. We talked about the emissions repair.
the administration, you'll see on page 9, flags that because this is a current year appropriation, the Department of Corrections could, in theory, spend out of that appropriation, and there wouldn't be 650,000 left at year end to revert. So it's just a matter of if the General Assembly would prefer to have the reversion or reduce the appropriation.
So the dollar impact is the same, it's just whether you revert in that.
Right.
And they're recommending which one?
They're recommending to reduce the appropriation.
And it doesn't really matter which way.
Yeah, I mean, to my knowledge, it just is, it would remove the department's spending authority as opposed to just signaling to the department that at year end, the General Assembly released its budget, assuming that 650,000 will be reverted.
I got a quick question.
Yeah.
So do we know what line item came from that 650? DOC budget?
Yeah, B338. I'll pivot to Amy on this.
So, in joint fiscal office, do you mean like personal services in terms of line item?
Well, I was just questioning because of my conversation with appropriations, House Appropriations, as far as the carry forward and use of the 650 from the free trial supervision services. Is that part of this funding here?
That's what this is.
That's what they said.
Yes.
Okay, so
So I think yesterday when I was talking about positions, there was the 7 positions that the
Right.
governor recommended and then the House did not agree. And that's all part of this construct.
okay, so they took the carry forward from this and then they put it back into the general fund.
That's right.
And then
Yeah.
I thought they used it for other purposes, but then the general has to follow up with my contact in the house.
I believe so. It's reverting the money, right, for other purposes.
Okay.
And so the administration here is flagging just that if you don't actually formally reduce the appropriation, the Department of Corrections could, in theory, still spend out of that appropriation. But it's could decide which construct they would like to use.
Any questions?
On page 12, number 2 on the top there, it says joint fiscal committee at its July meeting, and I don't think joint fiscal is meeting in July. It's a minor.
We didn't,
Huh?
we didn't, a meeting on.
I think they said in our memo that we weren't meeting in July,
Oh, I see.
but I don't know whether that makes a difference.
I think JFO staff is trying to
Sort that out.
firm up the dates. So yeah, we would reflect whenever the first JFC meeting is of the summer.
Right, yeah.
We usually meet in July.
Typically, yeah.
Typically, the typical thing is
It's the end of July.
the emergency board meets and, to set, and do the revenue estimates, and that's usually the 15th.
We are meeting in July.
And then after that, so,
Where we
I'm
are.
not gonna worry about it.
because the emergency
Yeah.
board usually meets and the chairs are there, so we usually do. So
Double.
that would be weird.
Don't be weird. Then,
At the bottom of page 13, section E100. This is an issue that was flagged for us quite late in the process after the bill had already been introduced. But we were aware of this. The mediator position, is intended to be created as an exempt position rather than classified. The position will be dealing with, employee relations issues, and for that reason, it's logical for them to not be, a member, not have a bias or.
okay,
Section E105. So this is recommended language from the administration, just clarifying that because the CIT fund is an internal service fund, you would want to actually reference that it's a negative fund balance rather than a negative balance, because it could have a negative cash balance, in which case the technology modernization special fund would be transferred to when that is not necessarily necessary. And then it also clarifies that that transfer would be made by the Commissioner of Finance and Management. The original language didn't clarify who was executing that transfer, so the administration recommended including that, and then put a date on that that reflects the actual full accrual fund when finance management would actually know whether or not a deficit for the fund itself exists. And so, pending any decision on whether or not to include this change, these technical entities would make sense.
when would it accept what?
If the committee decides to make this statutory change to the technology modernization fund, so.
Okay. Next,
Section E105.1, you'll see the recommended change from the administration on the top of page 15. Again, this clarifies fund deficit since it's an internal service fund. Just clarifying that it should not be based on the cash deficit, but actually the fund balance deficit.
what's the change? Oh, that's just the workshop. One word.
Section E106, this is language the House added in requiring that part of the budget presentation from the administration in statute includes a document detailing reversions and approved carry forward by appropriation. The language in red here says for those funds subject to the Secretary of Administration's carry forward authority as designated by the General Assembly, which you see at the end, that's the language that appears at the end of the budget bill. There are frequently appropriations that have carry forward language attached to them directly. So the General Assembly will make an appropriation in one budget bill or another and say that those funds shall carry forward until fully expended or reverted. And presumably having information on those appropriations that don't fall under this administration, Secretary of Administration authority would be useful. So, I think the JFO would recommend not including this change and keeping it broadly applicable to all carry forward.
So what does the sentence read now? This,
A document outlining reversions and approved carry forward by appropriation.
just period.
You would leave it at that.
Correct, to not inadvertently exclude some of those appropriations that have specific carry forward authority that falls outside of that Secretary of Administration carry forward.
But if you made this change, the Secretary of Administration would have more carry forward authority than we want possibly.
They wouldn't have any more carry forward authority. It would just be that the only carry forward that they would report to you on are the ones that they made at their discretion under the carry forward authority they currently have. But presumably the General Assembly might want information on
Yeah.
appropriations with carry forward, where that carry forward continues automatically because of legislative language.
Yeah, I agree. We want to keep that.
Section E-133, this relates again to the OPEB administrative costs. So those numbers show up both in the B sections and the language sections. And so this is just a technical correction to the number that appears in that section.
Okay.
Section E-136.2. This relates to the establishment of rules for the State Ethics Commission. And JFO touched base with Legislative Council, and Legislative Council is redrafting this language, but understood the administration's concern because the language as it was in the House bill would allow for the adoption of rules that wouldn't exist until the effective date essentially wouldn't establish the permission to adopt rules in statute until all of that language is added to statute. So this is just a tweak that would have that 3 VSA 1230B that says they may establish rules. It would add that language to statute before the rest of this is added to statute. So as to not direct the Ethics Commission to adopt rules when there's no statutory authority to do so. Section
That was extended as the rule date.
correct, yeah. So this would just allow them to adopt the rules under 32 or 3 BSA 1230B, even though the other rulemaking provisions are extended.
Right.
Section E301. This relates to the change from the Medicaid Reimbursement Special Fund to the School-Based Medicaid Reimbursement Fund. Because the School-Based Medicaid Reimbursement Fund will be in existence by the time this year-end construct or global commitment has to be addressed, the administration correctly identified that it should refer to the new fund rather than the old fund.
Okay.
Section E307.3. This language was included clarifying apologies, one moment. This relates to again the school-based Medicaid fund. So this clarifies that the Commissioner of Finance and Management cannot apply excess receipt authority to that fund.
Okay.
Section E307.7. The school-based Medicaid reimbursement fund will be established at the time. This is clarifying rather than transferring and added to the fund balances, assets, and liabilities of the fund. Just clarifying that anything in that fund is transferred. So it's just duplicative and clean up language on that.
For the transfer and
Exactly.
for your own.
Section E329.1. So the administration had no technical understanding of what line items referred to in regard to this language that directs Dale to present as separate line items in the choices for care program, home and community-based services, and skilled nursing facility services. In discussions that Legislative Council had with the House Human Services Committee, House Human Services confirmed that the intent was for Dale to present these as separate appropriations. So this language would align with that intent. So if the committee decides to agree to this language, then this technical change would align with the House's intent.
Okay.
Section E 514.1, again, this is another OPEB related change, so just tweaking that number there. Section E 515, required teachers' healthcare and medical benefits. There was an unintended duplicative deduction for new teacher healthcare. So that just is correcting the numbers to actually reflect accurately. And then I would just ask the committee to skip over this section E 501.3. The language included here is not technical.
So what do you, not technical meaning?
The House removed language relating to moving where excess estate tax revenue went. So moving it from going to the Higher Education Endowment Trust Fund to the School Construction Aid Special Fund. And the administration included the original GovRec language here, which would again move that estate tax revenue. I believe it was included because there's some statutory cleanup language in here still.
So you're saying it's more of a policy change. I think I mentioned to this a few Senator Bruce, but I was thinking they were taking it out of the higher ed trust fund. They're just preventing it going from the higher ed trust fund instead going to school construction trust.
Right, the Higher Education Endowment Trust Fund under this construct would no longer receive excess estate tax revenue. And the House made a policy decision to not accept that recommendation. And the language here reflects the governor's recommendation. And there is one technical tweak in just that it says, you'll see it strikes out or appropriated because funds can't be appropriated to a fund, they have to be transferred. So that statutory cleanup, I believe that's why it was included here, but just if that policy change is not being made by the Senate Appropriations Committee, then I don't believe that cleanup is necessary.
Okay.
Section E 700.3, this just is correcting the section reference. So the funds for these position pool positions for A&R, those funds are actually added in section B 711. And the internal reference here is section B 700. So that would just correct that. And this section would likely, if the committee accepts the creation of those positions, this section would probably be changed to also be section E 711. Section F 100, the administration had recommended technical adjustments to pay act language. Legislative Council prepare reviewed that and said that the changes seemed appropriate. On page 20, this is further recommended changes to the pay act that Legislative Council confirmed were technical in nature. And then beginning on the bottom of page 20 and continuing on, this relates to what the Chief Recovery Officer was discussing with the committee yesterday. So just the new proposed construct for that disaster relief funding, rather than having it be from the Community Disaster Mitigation, Community Resilience and Disaster Mitigation Fund, having it come from the general fund and go to the Agency of Transportation. So this construct, if the Senate Appropriations Committee determines that they would also like to add this one-time appropriation, this construct seems more technically appropriate.
Mhm. All right,
John,
Senator Farrell, any of you, Chris? Okay. With that, that was the intermission. So where are we? B 1100.
I believe that that does it for the technical letter.
What was the page? What was that?
Apologies.
The B 1100. What was that page? I didn't hear.
Yes, so that is reflective of what the chief recovery officer discussed with the committee yesterday. Rather than appropriating from transferring from the general fund to the community resilience and disaster mitigation fund. This would be a direct general fund appropriation to the agency of transportation for those community disaster.
And then the other thing that the recovery officer talked to us about, that's not in here because they realized about that other change after this letter was.
Right, I'm not sure on the timing of when that was flagged. I know that that was flagged for inclusion in the House bill and just it was not included by, it was fell off everyone's radar, but
Okay,
that's not included in this letter.
so it was flagged by the administration in the House, and then they forgot to put it in their own technical on it. Somebody forgot, but it's somewhere. Let's say that.
It's a bit of a forgotten child, I would say, but I think that language is from the drug fiscal perspective makes sense.
It's the emergency rental. Something. ERAD. Okay, so let's quickly review what I consider unapproved changes. Right,
Unapproved.
unapproved,
Unapproved.
unapproved changes would be on page 10. Let's see, we're not quite sure. We're gonna get more information about the rental, the emission rebate program. And then also we keep open C 109, page 11. I think. Is there still a question about that? Or I guess we just, it's a 9,000, I guess my note is that there's a $9,000 loss to the bottom line. I assume that's accounted for. I guess it's like
Sorry, say that again?
in this technical correction, it's a $9,000 difference. If we were to make this technical correction, it means $9,000 less on the bottom line. Page 11.
The school redistricting task force appropriation.
Here, can you want those for it?
Mm-hmm. I need to look at that. Oh, yeah, but this would be. Yes, that would be, we'd have to account for that.
Okay.
$9,000.
So it's now accounted, yes.
Correct.
Let's see.
Okay. Oh, sorry. Thank you.
Okay. So we'll just make sure. So we'll consider it. And then page 13, E100. I think it's okay, but I sent another email to the Labor Relations Board. And then we also have 102. One of those changes is the emission repair program. So that's held open. So I guess D102 is open because it included the emission repair program. And then it also has a sub-specific position. So if we kept that open, that also keeps open those DOC positions. And then D100, I just want to get more information from the Labor Relations Board on that. So I'm taking that up and then did we want to keep E106 open? Or no, are we agreeing?
So E106, so that would be limiting the reporting requirement to only those appropriations which carry forward that fell under the Secretary of Administration's carry forward authority.
We're not.
Yeah. So it's not like we're keeping it open.
We're going to support.
Not agreeing.
Yeah.
So you're not throwing them all then?
Not agreeing.
I'm checking the shelf.
Okay.
Thank you.
And I don't know if we make any changes to the ethics commission charges, is that F-103.2? Could that change or doesn't really matter because this they had new rulemaking, or we just pushed back rulemaking that they were asked to do 2 years.
Yes, so, this technical change that is being recommended here, would just allow for the section of statute that authorizes the adoption of rules to be added to statutes, so that the ethics commission can actually begin working on those rules before the rest of this is actually added to statute. So it's just clarifying that, for the point process there, that they need that little bit added to statute, even though the rest of that those statutory requirements would be getting pushed out.
Okay. So that's fine. And then on page 18, E515, or no, E501.3, this is just another one wording not accepted. At least that's my position. If anybody,
No,
it's a non-technical change, so it should be considered as more of the fate. And it's in the Dear Jane letter, so we were. We want to talk about, well, I guess this isn't in the Dear Jane letter, but the whole issue is the specific thing about moving money to the school construction isn't in the Dear Jane letter, but it's here as technical change, but I'm proposing we don't consider it technical, take it out.
Well, how much is it?
But we don't know because it's the excess amount of the estate tax over the
Right.
forecast. So
So we don't,
it could be nothing. It could be, well, last year it was $23 million. Okay, we're gonna say no. Gonna say no. So the rest of them are okay. And then we're just having a note that we're gonna add, which is sort of a technical change that ERAS like, but maybe that's not a technical change, that's just a change.
It wouldn't be a technical, it was never the house bill, so it wouldn't be, but,
Doesn't really matter if we call it a technical change or not at this point.
yeah, I think that it is in effect a technical change.
Okay. Any questions, comments about the technical letter? Okay. So I thought we could also spend some time going through the language. You took us through the language, right? Reading
Yes, last week,
this stuff.
yes.
Is there a way to go through it to where we would just accept or close out section? Is there?
Sure thing. I think starting with the C sections on page 15 of that document would make sense. That would be skipping over the one-time appropriations with.
Yes.
Looks like this.
Should have red,
If you flip through, you'll see red.
is it online?
Like it's.
they could be posted on the committee page for today and reminding us, something with changes.
Needs to make sense.
Do you make additional change? You know, this is the bill with the red change.
Yeah.
With the red
so we're
changes, yeah.
starting over.
It's always a good thing when the entire committee's seeing red.
How far did we get last time?
Well, we got through the whole thing,
Yeah,
but we're gonna
go back again.
talk about closing out some sections.
Okay.
But we're gonna start at page 15.
Correct. So that would just be skipping over, sort of the A sections that deal with here's how to read the bill and here's where things are. And then the one-time appropriation sections, which typically the committee won't review until after it's approved everything into the spreadsheet that Emily and Amy track.
Speed order action.
Okay. Alright. But you got it.
Okay, so do you want to do section by section?
Sure thing, yeah. So
Second one.
section E100, this is an amendment to,
So we're going to E or C?
or sorry, C100. This is an amendment to Act 74, the budget adjustment that was just passed. This was stating that the Commissioner of Finance and Management would transfer funds from the Human Services Caseload Reserve. The Commissioner of Finance and Management does not have the authority to do so. So this would just make the adjustment to state that the Commissioner of Finance and Management unreserved funds, but then the funds themselves are actually appropriated from the Human Services Caseload Reserve.
And close that out and say when next.
Section C101. So this, again, this was language that was in Act 27, the current year budget. And this stated that for the purposes, it would be for the community homelessness partners, that the dollar amount would be $1.322 million for the purpose of restoring the community partners to the FY25 appropriation level. That dollar amount does not match the FY25 appropriation level. So this would just be cutting that language.
That's it. Okay, we can close that out.
C102 would be amending the budget adjustment. This is where that 74.9 million of the fiscal year end balance is being held for addressing federal funding shortfall, property tax relief, etc. Because of changes in the House version of the miscellaneous tax bill, there is anticipated to be less on the bottom line than what originally thought. So this section would update that number to make it 70.9 rather than 74.9.
Is it just the changes from the miscellaneous tax bill or is it other?
That's my understanding.
I thought they were making changes that brought in more
In FY27.
on this 26.
Yes.
Okay, moment. So it doesn't, how is that? It doesn't really matter because that money was set aside.
Right. So there will be less, it's expected there will be less to pull from 26 to 27 because of the changes in the miscellaneous tax bill.
And it's just about federal changes as well, more than tax credits or things that would be.
Yeah, I believe it's the differences in terms of linking up.
Right.
So because of that, there will be slightly less revenue at FY26, but then more in FY27. But this just,
You know, if the administration is objecting to the provision in the miscellaneous tax to do this, or
I can't speak to that. This would just be a technical adjustment to reflect, if the miscellaneous tax bill were to be enacted, this is a necessary technical adjustment.
but if it doesn't pass, then it would happen. So we could close this technical change out because it just says if the miscellaneous bill passes, this is the actual reduction.
Yeah, it's likely that regardless of anything that happens, the number that was in the budget adjustment will not be the final number here. So this section, I would just say, is in all likelihood will be included and just updated to whatever the most accurate number is.
Okay, we'll close that.
Section C.
You're not closing it until we finalize.
I mean, we're clearly talking about it. But you'll put the
We'll
real,
tell you what the new thing is.
the real number will show up at some.
Yeah.
Right, but it's necessary to include the section, regardless of anything.
What section was that?
C102.
Even
It's
to
about
page
from the
16.
BAA.
So you got to shut down on.
Section C103, so this is making amendments to, the appropriation in Act 73. We discussed this before. It's just changing the allocation of that appropriation, increasing the amount that's available for transition grants, and then decreasing the amount available for contracted services, and then setting guardrails around the allocations of that appropriation. It doesn't change the dollar amount itself.
But it changes wording about how they're used. So I think we have to keep this up as soon as the policy decision. Something that was mentioned in the administration secretary's letter. So we'll keep section C-103 open.
Section C-104 on page 19. This is related to the authority for responding to reductions in federal funds that was put into Act 27. And so this detailed the parameters for if there's a reduction in the unduplicated function total, what the Secretary of Administration must notify the Joint Fiscal Committee of, and what actions can be taken. And the change here would be to just extend these guidelines beyond the current fiscal year, so that if there are federal reductions in FY27, FY28, or FY29, this same mechanism would still be in place.
Okay, anybody object to that? And close out C-104.
C-105 on page 21. This is the retention. Would amend statute to provide the Secretary of State with the authority to retain the unobligated balance in the Secretary of State Services Fund.
And,
Yeah, we might want to keep this open. So this,
so they've gotten rid of that
I
ability.
don't know how much it is.
That's,
This
I don't know.
would strike language that currently what remains in the fund is then pulled out of the fund into the general fund. This would allow for the Secretary of State to retain.
and what is the state's service? I mean, the service fund at the Secretary of State's, like, do you know what that is?
How much?
I would have to get back to you. I know in recent years, nothing has been available to pull from the fund into the general fund.
but it seems like you wouldn't be changing the language unless there's something.
Well, unless there might be something to hang on
But
to.
my understanding is that this is different than the same way, the finance manager sweeps money at the end of the year. This is different, or that's the same?
That's the same thing. So I think it would be good to talk to the Secretary of State's
Is this-
office about why they want to keep, why they are asking to keep.
Has this ever been done? Is this language that was done before?
This would change existing statute, so it's statute, it doesn't
Yeah, but
year
that
end.
doesn't mean in
Finance.
session law, we have to put.
Oh,
it in.
not to my knowledge.
My understanding is that finance manager sweeps money at the end of the year. Secretary of State would rather keep it in the technology fund, so they could build up money for the technology projects. But we can keep it open, and we'll get some other SOS testimonies about that. That's what.
With that, I think the committee can skip ahead to page 31. On the bottom of page 31, section E-100.1.
Why not these fund transfers? Sorry.
The transfers, reserves, reversions, and position sections are all sort of remain outstanding until the committee makes decisions that are based more on Emily's spreadsheets really than the language. So the language ultimately will just reflect committee decisions that are discussed in vis-a-vis those spreadsheets.
What page?
Page 31,
The physician,
section E-100.1 at the very bottom of that page. You won't see the actual language until page 32. So this is language relating to reporting requirements for the Secretary of Administration on the status of ARPA funds and ARPA funds that were originally appropriations that were originally made from the ARPA fund that were then reverted and either repurposed or using general for those purposes. The original language required for the Secretary of State to report on the status of those funds in FY26. Because of the nature of this, that spending authority will continue on into FY27 and then in some cases FY28. So this would just require the Secretary of Administration to maintain those reports until all appropriations that relate to this are the spending authority is expired.
Think we can accept that.
On page 33, section E100.2, this is language that also appeared in Act 27, directing the Secretary of Administration to report to JFC at its 2026 meetings and other meetings as requested on any reductions to federal revenues to the state. So again, just adding that reporting requirement to this summer and fall.
Yes, we are meeting in July.
If we don't meet in July,
I
then
guess we are.
I guess we have to do
It's
it.
there, but.
That's when the emergency board
Yeah,
meets
so you're
around the 15th.
Right, yeah.
Because the chairs are here, we all just.
So we can put a pin to make sure that the months stated here are reflective of the actual scheduled dates for JFC meetings.
Okay. We will close that out.
I don't think that meeting is on the 15th.
No, it isn't on the 15th, but they're usually by the 15th. They have the numbers.
Sometime in July, end of July.
28th or 31st.
Uh-huh. That's pretty close to August. Yeah. Okay, E105.
Section E105. So this is language that would be added to statute stating that in the event of a deficit in the CIT fund, a portion of the balance of the technology modernization fund that only would be comprised of interest would be transferred to the CIT fund. As the committee might recall from a little bit ago, the technical letter had a recommended technical tweak to that. So if the committee accepted this language, then that technical change would be made. But this language would create an automatic mechanism for transferring interest from the technology modernization special fund to the CIT fund to address a fund balance in the latter.
But only if there's money obviously in there. Did the administration weigh in on this? I know they didn't like the taking of the interest out of the technology modernization fund, because they care about an ongoing sweep of interests, deal with the deficit in the information technology internal service fund.
I can't recall if this was also touched upon in the DOJ letter. The transfer of interest is from prior fiscal years. This would be for future fiscal years.
Well, let's just leave it open. I can't remember if they cared or not. Want to hear what they have to say about that before we prove it?
Section E105.1 relates to this issue. This would require a report from ADS to the House committees on appropriations on energy and digital infrastructure and the Senate committees on appropriations and on institutions on how to reduce the deficit in the CIT fund.
Written plan. I think the plan would be to put money into it. I would get rid of the,
You correct the report.
it could be a 1 cent or add money
Okay.
until it's not a deficit.
How much is the deficit left?
You remember? You guys remember what we helped it a little bit last year.
Got like a $25 million.
We got,
or,
didn't we do something like 9 million?
15.
Did-
Deputy Commissioner Merrill testified about it in House Appropriations.
There's still another 15 million.
There's still pretty significant deficit, and I think finance and management has made some change, made some changes in this budget to try to address it. I think it's yet to be seen, what progress will be made based on those changes, because you have to go through the fiscal year or two to see if it makes a difference. So you could move this money there to try to help mitigate it, or you to let the other changes in the budget play out to try to address it.
Well, this part is kept the other one open. This is just that they have to report.
Just a report.
Probably the written plans. I think their plan now is just that because they made changes to the ADS funds, the deficit would slowly get eaten away every year. So I guess we'll have them write that down. I'm okay with closing that report out. There's our 106.
Section E 106. So this, I believe, technically was closed out by the committee, closing out the technical letter. This is just in the budget presentation stating that that should include a document outlining reversions and approved carry forward.
This is the language that quotes
Yeah,
where the recommendation had been to
Correct.
just to extend that sentence, and we were like, nope, we're just gonna add a period.
Correct.
close that out.
Section E 111, I think the committee can skip over, because it deals with the creation of positions more generally.
Can I just ask about the JFO special fund report? E-127.
Yeah,
We're not there yet. Oh, no, we just got that.
Just got.
Yes.
I'm now wondering.
Now you have
it seemed to be the perfect time.
I'm just wondering, did JFO, agree to this or,
JFO, I believe, thinks that this report process would be valuable for the work of the General Assembly.
so it wasn't foisted on?
There was no foisting.
Okay.
Rick, somebody suggested it, and then we agreed that it would be a valuable use of our summer
Okay,
time.
great.
You agree?
For the next 4 years.
Be a busy summer. Because there are a lot
Appreciate the
of.
concern about the foisting.
Yeah.
And this is by December 15th.
Yes, the first general report would be due by December 15th. And then there is a years-long process of taking a chunk of special funds that relate to function areas of government, similar to how we do the fee report.
Right.
And so over the course of several years, JFO would complete reports that give a full overview of all special funds in existence.
Over the next 4 years.
Correct.
Okay. We would hate to take that work away from you, so I'll let you do it.
Section E 131 on page 38. Each year, the treasurer is required per statute to deliver a report on the financial picture for the Vermont Higher Education Endowment Trust Fund. This would just add language that's saying in this coming calendar year's report, that the report shall also include any recommended changes to revenue sources or expenditures from the fund.
Let's keep that open because there's going to be other proposed language on the higher education endowment trust fund, so we might want to tweak that report.
Sections E 133 and E 134 I'll keep open. Those numbers are updated just as the committee makes decisions relating to the pension systems. So that as the committee saw earlier, the technical letter included some recommended changes to reflect the accurate numbers in those sections. And I believe there's further discussion that would also necessitate the update of those numbers, so. Until the committee makes decisions relating to that, I'll just keep those sections open.
And we'll keep 135 open until we confirm the mediator, turn any questions.
Section E,
Oops, sorry. Go ahead.
E 136.1.
Actually, before we leave 135. On page 39. Line 16, C1, the board may employ a mediator to provide free mediation services to public and private sector employee collective bargaining units. I'm just wondering, does anybody know, is that something the board has done before? Because my own understanding is that people have always supplied their own mediators. But
Yeah, my understanding is that there was a federal mediation program that you could ask for a federal mediator. That program has been eliminated by the Trump administration,
an attempt.
but there was an attempt to put a mediator somewhere. I've heard from some that there are mediators, like Vermont mediators that you can pay. So you don't need to have a mediator here, but so that's one of the issues trying to figure out.
Yeah. And there may
And
be
that was the position that was added.
some
Correct.
power because.
And this just gives them the statutory authority to actually employ that position that you're creating,
When the House,
or that was created.
And to lend their services or give their services. Yeah.
that says, yeah, the mediator has capacity to provide free mediation services. The House Appropriations Chair said something about mediators being charging $450 an hour.
Right.
But when I talked to the union, they said that there were mediators available that aren't charging $400, that don't charge $400. So I was just trying to figure that out.
I'm not if you,
Uh-oh.
it'd be really good, $450 an hour.
Oh my gosh. It's more than we're making here.
It wouldn't take you long to make your salary.
Okay, E 136.1. I think we keep this open.
So, yeah, there are a number of sections that relate to changes to the State Ethics Commission and the creation of a state ethics handbook. I believe there's outstanding policy discussions of. So I recommend that E 136.1 through E 136.5, the committee keep open with just the understanding that if these sections are retained in the committee's version of the bill, then that technical correction in the technical letter regarding the effective dates would likely need to be incorporated. Section E 139 on page 45. This specifies that $70,000 in section B 139 is for the Department of Taxes Division of Property Valuation and Review. To be used for grantless litigation assistance for hydroelectric plants. So the committee, we discussed this last week, that there's ongoing disputes relating to that. And so this is specifically for that. And then E 139.1.
And it's clear that it's coming from the pilot fund.
Yes, so where you see that it's coming from the pilot fund is actually in the numbers section, that it just shows that it's special funds. And then E 139.1 is that session law notwithstanding language that makes that appropriation in B 139 and allow the use of the pilot fund.
Yeah, this was the certifications.
But we can close this out. Yeah, the large dam. This,
And Waterford,
Yeah.
they had real troubles with that, so.
close that out.
Section E 142 and section E 144 both relate to standard annual language for payments in lieu of taxes.
Okay. Both of those out.
Section E 200 is standard language, just directing that notwithstanding any other provision of the law, the Office of the Attorney General, Medicaid Fraud and Residential Abuse Unit may retain 1/2 of the state share of any recoveries from Medicaid fraud settlements, excluding interest.
Okay, both have that.
Section E 208 relates to the annual language of authorizing the Commissioner of Public Safety to enter into a contract with the Essex County Sheriff's Department.
They only do it with the Essex County?
Yeah, I would have to get back to you on the specifics here. This authorizing language appears
Every year?
every year.
Every year since the Lucy.
But he doesn't work for the. Sure.
No, but when he was on this committee, there's something about the Essex County Sheriff's Office.
So like Essex, so like state police don't have to police Essex County basically because the sheriff's doing.
I don't know enough about the policing situation in Essex County to say for sure.
Coverage.
But it is a rural area that seems like a logical.
And I know the Essex County Sheriff does some things that are different than the state police, so maybe that's one of the reasons why as well. Okay, well, we'll close it out for now. It's not our, no money in it.
Section E 209, this is annual language specifying allocations of an appropriation. Is E 209, 35,000 for the Southern Vermont Wilderness Search and Rescue Team, and 405,000 for grants to support the drug task force, and 2.1 million for the purchase, outfitting, assignment, and disposal of state police vehicles.
Do you know why? My guess is down, but I guess we could ask state police why it's only the Southern Vermont Wilderness Search and Rescue Team, like there's search and rescue teams throughout the state. Is there a reason one gets 35,000 and the other do not?
I can't speak to the details of the appropriations themselves and why some of these things are pulled out and why they aren't. These language appearing here, obviously for most of the appropriations that are made in the budget, there isn't this level of specificity. So presumably for some of these annual sections, at some point in the past, it was significant that it be called out.
I guess it's state police, fish and wildlife, county sheriff. Well, but only for snowmobile, of course.
Suspended here forever.
There's other snowmobile enforcement done by the board of this, right?
Well, that's as a contract with the Northeast Kingdom, and we had within the DMV bill, we increased that fee that is
Right.
this year to finance that with their contract for enforcement.
But I think they contract with sheriffs and boards do that.
They
They don't do it
do,
themselves.
but
They need
they
to have a
do
law.
in the rest of the state. I can't remember exactly what this is, but I think this is all in the national forest too.
Okay. Is it?
Yeah, it mostly is in the national forest, down Glastonbury, that whole thing.
Because it said local law enforcement personnel, Bennington, Wyndham, and Windsor counties.
And the national forest runs clear up through there.
I'm actually okay closing it out unless somebody wants to actually figure out why this snowmobile enforcement is happening. I'm sure it's,
State, I want to tell you a little bit I know about it. I think they're, fine. Not sure.
no, I want to hear it.
The $35,000. The majority of the money goes to state police, so they remain primary. And during the course of that, I'm sure such as Richie has said, sheriffs, fish and wildlife, and there's some municipalities in the southern part of the state, quite possibly in the other part of the state, that also receive some of these monies for vast patrol. So it's a variety of agencies that deal with it. But we want to make sure that the state is 651% of the money, so that they're the primary enforcer when it comes to accidents and DUIs and whatnot. But there are the default agency shall we say that we have a 24/7 service, so they're the default agencies. Richard probably said the same thing.
So the second paragraph, it says the of the money appropriated in this section, going B209, not E209.
I'm not sure where that money comes from.
When it talks about 3 town task force officers, are they statewide? Are they?
They used to have both the northern and southern task force, and what they do is it's headed up by the Vermont State Police. You know how a sheriff's officer from municipalities that will apply and be part of this process, and it pays their salaries and stuff.
Okay, and then the 2 million for state police vehicles. Okay, I'm okay. Yeah.
Section E 209.1, this is the creation of the Vermont State Police Radio Equipment Replacement Special Fund. That there is a transfer in the transfer section of $500,000 to
From where?
the general fund.
To see this fund.
Correct. And I believe in future fiscal years, the fund would require further transfers. The idea being that because of the sort of off-year nature of the purchases needed, this would secure funds for this purpose rather than an appropriation in one year that would be very significant appropriation or small appropriations each year that then may be used for other purposes. Ultimately, this would just slowly sit the necessary amount of money in a fund until it's needed for the purchase of radio equipment.
I think this was created because they got way behind and we got in this place where we owed a big chunk of money to do that. So I think it's a kind of a revolving fund that buys equipment over time instead of having us get way behind and then, and I think that's what happened.
Do you remember, or North, do you remember what how much they need? Like if they did an annual rotation, like
Originally, they put in for both firearms and radios, to portables and mobiles. And I think it was $5 million fund for each one of them. I don't see the radios. That's my question. I know I put language the firearms. I know we put language in for a capital claim or whatever that may be as far as establishing this fund. So if we don't get hit as hard. But did they ever get back to Amy on what they were going to do with the older firearms? That Henry was going to purchase those.
Yeah.
Does that go back into that fund or the general fund?
I'll double check.
The
But I
monies that they
I
received
think
from
it's
the sale
all stays within the public safety for purchasing firearms.
but they could just feed it in their general fund, they
They
could
could.
use it for whatever.
right.
Are you suggesting maybe if they do sell them, that stays into the special firearm reserve fund?
I mean, I don't know the commissioner what to do, but I mean, I was thinking if you for selling firearms, you put them back into that fund, the same fund, so that it would enhance that as your project. And not use it for like in a general fund for other things that might not.
Either that or the T fund, one or the other.
What that is that?
But I think there was also, like, the sale was also going towards the purchase of the new firearm. Yeah, I don't know if there was really
Person.
additional,
I can check with
Yeah.
Rick. I spoke to him this morning, actually. He's on a couple of days off, so we did text me back and forth here. I can check on that, see what we still get some money.
And would you like Grady to create language that mirrors this radio equipment replacement fund for fire?
Let me check.
I would-
what they're going to, yeah, if that's what they're doing, yes.
If you're supportive of the support doing that, does that make sense? Do you agree?
Amending this language to make firearm purchases and allow the use of the fund.
No. Have
Agree.
another
Same
replacement,
rotating.
have a replacement fund, a
Like
new
that,
replacement special fund for firearms.
Creating a second special fund.
Because we want to have more special funds for the JFO study.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well.
So that means we're leaving this open.
Yeah, this is open. We might create another 209.2, I guess. That would create a replacement special fund for firearm.
Firearms.
What about the capital plan that,
So we could do two things. We could ask them to do a report on how they would create a special fund or create fund firearm replacement, or we could just say they shall do it through a replacement special fund. And we could even, I don't know where they are with radios versus firearms, but we could put the 500 half and half. We're gonna do some more.
This is, I don't understand about traditional, if I may ask the committee a question, I don't have to review a bunch of documents that the committee received, but or the requirement of the capital plan for firearm purchases added to Act 27, was that included in the DPS budget presentation?
Did they do it?
No.
We talked about it, right?
They didn't do one.
Why don't you just put it in the budget?
So we asked them to do it, but they didn't do it. So we could create language that they basically have to create a special fund, so they would need a capital plan. Capital plan would be, they have a special fund. I mean, they're not required to put money into this radio fund. We're putting money in. Right?
Yeah.
But I think for the firearms, one thing, and I don't know, we could do this to the radios. I don't know if they ever sell the old radio. Nobody buys that, but people buy the old firearm.
There is language about the sale of radios in the special fund creation language, though.
Okay.
That's what Henry's pointing on now.
Does the money that they gain from selling the radio stay in the radio? equipment
Yes.
replacement? Okay, so we do that for the firearms.
Mayor both of them, so.
Yeah. And we could reiterate request for a capital plan, maybe the second time then, That's just,
Well, and if I may, I mean, as long as we're dabbling in this section, I mean, I'm thinking about Fish and Wildlife, and I realize it would not live right here. But a similar contract for the radios that they need.
for the wardens.
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, because didn't they have money this year in for radios?
I have to go back and look.
I think they did.
that was a
The question,
question.
it's the same
It's
question.
the same.
What do they do with guns?
What
What
are
is
wardens?
and do they do it in a rotation?
Yes.
Now you're professional.
We had a history of.
You wouldn't want to have one
trouble
trouble.
and
Like, it would be better to
do it too.
plan ahead and yeah, save up, have it be steady.
And they replace them all at once, I just can't do it enough. We'll get the 50 this year, then 50 next year, whatever else.
For the stick with the word, how many wardens are carrying like 50 wardens?
This I did not.
Roughly 37, 38,
Because they could replace those all.
they could be.
Right, the police would probably do it and have a rotated.
I mean, the deputy commissioner this morning, I'll talk to Rick or the deputy
Okay.
commissioner.
Thanks. Text with the commissioner, see what he says.
Okay, so also it might do it for Fish and Wildlife.
I just asked if you're gonna ask some questions around. Do they, and I'm sure they probably do, but do they do that with their trucks and cars?
Trucks and
Are they
cars.
ones to?
Yeah, I was looking at that with the previous page on page 47. But like, thinking about cars and trucks.
We've notoriously waited with all of these things until we get to troubles and questions.
I think they have that same funding mechanism that the state has, unfortunately,
What you mean?
allocated monies.
Oh.
Not all of our.
What is this normal language where it says that the commissioner of finance management can issue forms based thereon? For anticipated receipts? Would that be like they could anticipate this $500,000 going in there and allow them to buy the guns before July 1st, and this is an effective date July 1st, that kind of money that's me. The warrant is like a purchase. You know?
Yeah, warrant is just like the mechanism by which the department says, we want to buy this, finance says, okay, goes to the treasurer. And the treasurer makes the payment.
So this is kind of normal.
It's normal, yeah.
Okay.
Actually, on line 12, they do have that question, the proceeds from the sale of any existing, right, and put a bunch of consistent proceeds. I would assume that go back into that. Just
Yeah.
do the same thing for the firearms?
Yeah,
Okay.
and so we're gonna do it on one open 212. Is it only for the designing of dry hydrants? Like not for the building of them?
For this language, yes. I spent a little time trying to look into this and could not come up with much. So I have to dig in further to find out the history, the origin of this, but it is annual language of a $55,000 allocation for the design of dry hydrants.
So it's probably been there every year for years.
It's been there for 20 years.
I would just assume there's not a lot of design. I mean, it's pretty straightforward.
They're so close to perfecting it.
What would happen if we just cut?
Let me just go buy it, right?
Well, the dry hydrants are important, but I assume it's for putting them in and not just like somebody designing like, yeah, put the pipe in the water and put the
Yeah.
pipe outside here for the truck to hook up to it. Like,
New straps, big
Maybe,
back.
maybe each dry hydrant is unique to this situation and
And yeah, the stream.
and that include both.
And maybe you need like stream engineer to talk about where you're gonna put the pipe in the stream.
Maybe they're changing the paint job.
Yeah.
Designing new.
Try a new logo for the dry hydrant. Okay, well, if you want to look into it more, it'll work fine.
That's a lot of scripting.
I do like dry hydrants.
Well, we've been doing this for years, so
There, I mean, for like where I live, when I was on the volunteer fire department, we didn't have dry hydrants. We wouldn't have water without fires. Like it's really the only source.
get help, they control insurance costs.
Yeah. Like distance to a dry hydrant. Okay.
Section E215, this is the annual language directing the amount appropriated to VSAC to be for the Vermont National Guard Tuition Benefit Program.
But back to the dry hydrants, is the fire protection task force part of like fire prevention? You know where that,
The digging around, I do not, the Vermont Rural Fire Protection Task Force is not a state entity.
so where do they send money?
This is an appropriation to public safety, and then this is 55,000 of that appropriation is granted to the Vermont Rural Fire Protection.
So they just send them. Okay. So E215, we can close out, and then are people okay with all the military positions that were created, mostly federal funded?
75% for the pump.
75, yeah. I mean, I'm okay closing all those out, assume we're not gonna object to those positions. Or the $10,000 for the US itself, Vermont support group. I saw a submarine, by the way,
You did?
just recently.
Did you go down to Connecticut?
I was actually off the coast of New Hampshire. I was on the coast. The submarine was off the coast.
Wow.
And it came, because
Did it surface?
yeah, because there's a naval shipyard there.
Yeah.
Going in for repairs or something. Yeah. But for that reason, I'm gotta give them $10,000.
Section E222, this is a position pool, position to the Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets.
It's always hard for these administrative services. But this was included in the governor's.
It's in the governor's recommend and that, what's it doing?
Administrative services. It's managing administrative services.
Who has the A?
I
Do you know
spoke to
who it
Nicole
is?
this, she's gonna get back to you.
Oh, she is, okay.
We should
You wanna leave it open?
keep
Yes,
it open
please.
until we at least know what.
Just check on what it is.
Okay, we did get an email from her on the. She did.
Yeah,
Did we send it to the whole committee or did she send it to the committee or just,
you were not on, I sent it to you, I sent it to the committee, yes.
okay, so the committee did get it through,
Yeah.
okay. But she answered some of the questions we had on the fees.
Hopefully I haven't seen the letters. Yeah.
I'm gonna
You're
read
talking about the
you,
positions.
make sure everyone,
I,
see,
what I say.
ending it again.
Not a good.
Okay, E232.
So this is calling out the allocation of the appropriation to the Secretary of State. Should be provided to the Vermont Access Network. I believe in the GovRec, the number was a bit shy of $1.3 million. The House has it as $1.8 billion, changing the allocation of the appropriation.
Yeah.
You mean, because it was going to secretary?
This is calling out of the amount of money that's appropriated to the Secretary of State, how much is to provide to the Vermont Access Network. So the House did not increase the appropriation to the Secretary of State, just increasing how much of that appropriation is for the Vermont Access Network.
And this was the second of 3-stage bump up. Like it was 1.35 last.
I think, well, that in Vermont Access Network once, that's their request is to have a slow increase of the support for community access TV. Assuming we keep it open, just all appropriations. I support it though, we can keep it open. We talk about it.
Section E233. This is language relating to the adoption of a telecommunications plan. This just amends that plan from being every 3 years to every 5 years.
Okay with that?
Mhm.
If you want it to be 3 years, you have to read the last 3. Human Rights Commission.
Section E236, this is a position pool, staff attorney investigator position at the Human Rights Commission.
Didn't we add a position
We
during?
did, and I can't remember what we did in the budget adjustment. And this reflects that.
This, yeah, is this like close out the year or something? Do you know, Grady, or do we have
I think
that?
it was, they wanted 4, we did 2.
I thought they did it.
Yeah, we did, that's something like that, and but
Yeah.
we did it in the budget adjustment.
Yeah.
So, does this track with what we did in the budget?
I think this would be another one. I think.
Another 30 would be more than just to finish up the year.
Well,
Any
this
JFO members in the room now?
So
this would
there
be the full,
I
in
would think so, just
in
maybe not. Maybe it's because it's an attorney.
Which section are we?
when the government would have put
Say it's on
together
page
their
51.
budget, they wouldn't have reflected what we did in the budget adjustment. So I'm wondering if this is the position we added, and it's the full year.
Right, could be the full 26. That would be half,
So,
130 for half the year would be fine.
well, this would be the whole year, because this is the next year.
All right.
The budget adjustment would have been the half.
So this would be the whole fiscal.
Yeah, so 130, that's still cheap for an attorney.
Institution.
Let's keep it on.
I could do that. That's my sexy. Go, Brennan, go. Just so we know how many positions, when we're talking about positions, we already added one. This wasn't a staff attorney that we had before.
To my recollection, there wasn't a staff attorney investigator position established in the budget adjustment. There was a staff attorney investigator position established in Act 47, but this would be a separate new staff
So
attorney
what was, what
investigator.
is issue in the budget adjustment? We did something for the human rights.
We did, we funded
Yeah.
positions.
That's how we did an intake specialist.
And maybe it was lower. Yeah.
Last year.
Brad's gonna figure it out.
Well, we're not. We did the budget adjustment. That wouldn't have been in the governor's budget at that point in time.
Right. Good. We're gonna leave it up until we get more clear.
I think we want to reflect at least what we did in the budget adjustment.
Then E300.
Yes, so this, is specifying funds appropriated in section B 300, 2.45 million, for a contract with the Office of the Healthcare Advocate, 1.71 million for Vermont Legal Aid, including the Poverty Law Project, and 650,000 for maintaining current Vermont Legal Aid program capacity.
Do you want to know what the gov rec was for the Office of Healthcare Advocate?
I can pull it up.
It wasn't anything. It was just.
No, there,
It was flat funded,
It was
was
flat.
Yeah.
Yeah, what's the difference
to
for 240?
increase.
I assume the 450 is spread because it's the only part of that number that changed, or was it? 450,000 difference?
I do.
Yeah, the House gave them an increase, otherwise they didn't level, but the governor level funded them, the House put an increase for it.
Yeah, that's the question.
So it's 2000406.
Oh, yeah, it's not there, yeah.
Yes, exactly correct.
That's not.
So it's a 450,000.
Correct.
Yeah. Actually, I am Human Rights Commission.
Ah,
I will be on this.
Oh,
you almost got Brendan to do your work.
No,
I was staying silent.
figured it out.
You figured out that somebody else did. Okay,
Be happy to, you want to do it or you want?
okay, so for this healthcare advocate, should we leave that open as we talk about all the, is it part of the whole, any healthcare stuff you're doing?
it's not part of, no, I would support it.
I support it too, but do we want to,
Yeah, we probably should,
we'll
just
leave it
because
open?
there's other funds out there.
We haven't gotten the healthcare committees,
It's only like 60 to 80 general fund,
68 each, and
Yeah,
60 to 80,000 general fund because of the
Right.
mix of bill back and local commitment. I forget the exact number.
right. Let's do one more and then we'll adjourn for the day. Yeah, that's.
Section E 300.1. This relates to monthly reports from AHS to the Joint Fiscal Committee and the Joint Justice Committee on the plans to develop the Green Mountain Youth Campus. And then it also states that TCF and VGS cannot expend funds on the further development of the youth campus until either the Joint Fiscal Committee, in consultation with the chairs of relevant standing committees, reviews one or more of the reports received, or until the General Assembly formally authorizes resumption of spending by legislative act.
This is the complete unambiguous written,
yeah, this is the unambiguous.
Oh, yes.
as opposed to the majority of the written analysis.
We should do that.
Correct, Julie?
For all of
It's
them.
horribly.
Does anybody that have the agency of human services, do you know how they feel about that?
Yeah, I had a meeting with them yesterday. I'm trying to remember what we decided. I think it's okay. It's on,
It's-
two sections here. Remember what we decided on that, on this?
So like-
We talked to them yesterday. I don't remember, to be honest with you. I think it's probably okay. There's no money in
I don't
here,
think TCF likes it.
but
But
I would assume
I don't know
that,
if what,
I don't think PCF likes it,
No, they don't like it at all.
so I don't know what's decided.
Unambiguous probably should be changed.
That's just a poking.
It's not a healthy word here.
not a healthy word.
No, maybe.
So ambiguous or?
That's right, to develop an analysis, and it says written analysis.
Complete written defense.
It's progress on a written analysis.
Or,
Not an analysis.
Yeah, and
Get rid of the written.
on an analysis. Yeah, it'd be weird if they did an analysis that way.
Right. If
And
there's
it's-
anything
And
else,
it's numbers too.
we
Estimated
should,
costs.
we should probably hear
Somebody look at it.
yeah, I think we need to fix this.
we need to be, you know, it's 41 bed.
Yeah,
It's just a minute.
Yeah, and this, I think, is the aftermath.
Do they have the money for it?
So I think what's happening is there's money in the capital bill to can do the planning. And I think they're spending 4 million on, I think with Red Clover. And I think the issue is if the campus isn't built, then it's another year, they're gonna have to continue to do one time for Red Clover. So it's like, I think the House wanted to postpone it because they didn't like that they were signing contracts to do it and then coming for the appropriation after they've already signed their contracts. So that was the thinking on it.
That's always fun.
But DCF says that the longer we put off building it, the more time we'll continue to do one time 4 million, keep the board closed. So that's the rub.
Okay,
Well, this is.
So I'll allow it, yeah.
I think we should leave it open.
so we'll ask PCF.
Yeah.
To respond to section E 300.1.
Where is this?
I forget.
And in the Essex. Before they wanted to do it.
Yeah,
It was
we were
turned
so
out to
successful in
Newbury.
citing it. We're so successful in
Is this the one
citing.
that's gonna be in the prison?
No,
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 that's.
no, this is kids.
Oh, that's the print.
And, and
This is,
it may be.
Cambridge.
This was in.
This is kids.
Just kidding.
We're not, yeah, so they wouldn't go in.
no, but
I don't know.
It is in institutions right now, and that's the combination.
So maybe, so the money, bills are interested.
There's like 770,000 or something like that in the capital bill for like planning of it. Which I can talk more about that, but
I was wrong.
Okay,
The, revenue setting says January 15th. In the July one says they will come out with an estimate by
and
July 31st.
we're gonna go
I look at the statute,
with